Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins and I'm super excited. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mr. Marty Leeds. This feels like Christmas for me. Hello and welcome, Marty.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, nice to be here. It's been a long time in the coming. I just want to take a minute to turn Rockfin on. We're going to go live over there. I will grab a link to anyone who prefers that platform. Got a few people already waiting. And so give me just a minute while we get our little ducks in a row. And welcome everyone who's coming in the room. We got Jen McNally, your, do you call it better half?
Much better half.
Much better half. Billington Bears here. Hello, Stacy. Will Gensky, who I've very, very quickly grown to love. What a beautiful soul. He did some good praying for my friend the other day. Welcome the Accidental Alchemist and A. Clark and Jared Poole. And ducks in a row. Dawn is here. Nice to see you. That's awesome.
Love Dawn.
Yeah, she's a beautiful soul. She's in my House of Free Will and has done a few interviews with me as well. So welcome everyone. If you're new to the King Heroes Journey, this is where I host those people who are willing to speak out and say the truth and go against the grain and go deeper than just searching for the lies, but actually finding the truth both in the world out there and very much inside themselves. I'm an archetype and deprogramming coach, also do some business coaching, and I help people to get to the root of what it is that's causing them disturbance or discomfort or all of the weird things that happen in life and we can't control. So Marty Leeds is here. Super, super happy to have him. And Marty, you don't know it yet because I haven't told you my whole big story, but I went through, thanks to the pandemic, went through a kind of like reclaiming my Christian roots. My ancestors were Christian. They were persecuted for their Christianity. Some of them jailed. Lots of, they had to flee for their lives based on their faith from Russia. And when the pandemic hit, it, through the studies of law, brought me to the Bible. And I never expected that. Started looking and going like, oh my goodness, there's something big here asking for my attention. So I spent a couple of years going down the Christian rabbit hole. And I bumped up against a lot of stuff that just not, things didn't make sense and the people didn't make sense. And when I asked questions, I wasn't welcome in that situation. I had two people break up with me asking about oneness with Jesus, oneness with God. And that it was over. It was, I had crossed some evil line and they didn't like that. And so that's why it took me a long time to come to your work, because, their projection on your work would be that it's all satanic and that you're missing the boat and you're denying the true being who was Christ and all of that kind of thing. So I bought into that, and I didn't think you were a Satanist. I just thought, I'm going to try to go this, straight path or narrow path, whatever the heck it promised to be. And it wasn't that. I came out the other side. I'll make it short and start asking you questions. But I came out the other side with, I couldn't hang on to much of anything there, but I know that I love Jesus. Mm-hmm. This part, me and my relationship with God, with Jesus, there's undeniable power in that, whatever it is. And I'm hoping to shed some light on it. Today, we're going to talk about the alchemy of the Lord Jesus Christ. And I came up with that title, asked you right away if you could relate to it, because I don't even know exactly what I was going for in that title. But if you can relate to it, that's perfect. I think that's really cool. If I should have got you to do my quiz, the archetype quiz, maybe if you still have time after the stream and you feel up to taking a 10-minute quiz, we can find out where you are on the path of the hero's journey. I know you spoke a lot about the hero's journey. That's my obsession, sacred purpose in life. And so super happy to have you here. I'm glad that I'm able to now start seeing the wisdom and where you're coming from, and just poking my head into gematria, just the tiniest amount to see what's there. It hasn't spoke to me in the past, but last night I was watching you on Chance's Innerverse. So shout out to Chance for doing great interviews of you. And I heard you talking that here. Well, let's start with this one. I consider myself a professional pattern hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I do it at the more at the level of the psyche, the thoughts, the behavior, as a way to understand and navigate with more freedom. And so you brought up the fact that that word pattern has this root of pat in it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. How do we want to bridge that? Okay, well, let's start with this. Like when you say, like, you do the Lord's Prayer, right? When you say, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come," that sort of stuff. You don't realize that, like, what part of that is recognizing that when you say Father, the root of that is the word pater, which is the root of the word pattern. And so when you say "Our Father in heaven," one of the things that is being exemplified here is not just some like old bearded guy in the sky. It's basically saying, "Hey, those patterns that are available to us in the heavens." Pattern of the sun, the cycles of the moon, all of it, right? The entire cyclical canopy that's up there, all of those things actually tell us about inherent intelligence within the creation itself. Like that's one of the things. So when we say "Our Father who art in heaven," what you're basically saying, especially who art, is like very like creative, if you will. You could almost like reword it and saying like, the intelligent force that's in the heavens created these patterns to allow us to understand his intelligence. That's one of the things. And so, so when people say, a lot of times you'll get people that get into Christianity or things like that, and it's like very man-based. It's like the Father in heaven and stuff. Well, there's a reason for that, and there's also the counterpart of the mater, the material world, which, as far as my perspective is, at least as I can tell from modern Christianity, they've essentially scrapped all of that. They thought that's like pagan or something, and it's like, you couldn't be further from the truth of that. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it's just like, I'm sure we'll get to this in the creation. You always need your opposites. So just because something isn't said explicitly in the Bible does not mean that it's not there. So when I got to things like that, because I grew up around Christians my whole life, and a lot of times it's like, oh, this praise Jesus, Father, that sort of stuff. And it never really made any sense to me, because I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean though? Like, what are you actually saying? But then when you get into studying the roots of words, etymology, the history of these sorts of things, it's like, oh man, no, this is something extremely powerful. And then when you see these exact concepts in other cultures that are completely independent of Christianity, then you have to say, oh, there's something else going on here. There's something that's inherent, innate. There's something that's cosmic, axiomatic, whatever you want to say, that is absolutely, you could say, irrefutable. You're going to come to this truth if you stay on that hero's journey, if you stay on the course. So yeah, so Father, pattern, your pater. That's your Father who looks over his house, just like any man looks over his house. That's what he's doing. So
Beautiful. And so then, do you see like the creator God? That's how sort of the standard Christian narrative would go, that there is a creator God and birthed all of creation. And is that still true, or what you said at the beginning, that there must be masculine, feminine to birth?
Well, the original, when we talk about like the creator God, it's actually something that's beyond duality. So when we say Father, that is a symbolic, obviously, a symbolic language, right? But the reason that we're using Father for up there is because we have our mater down here. So if we are going to talk about creation in its totality, well, we can't just talk about the heavens. Or we can't just talk about the earth. We have to talk about both of them together as the totality of our experience. When you bring both of them together, that's what you actually have as the mother and the father. And so this is, in scripture, even though we refer to it as a father, when you actually talk about the being that's beyond, it's beyond the dualities. That's the whole point. You actually see this, and this is misconstrued by almost all Christians, as far as I could tell too. When you look at Adam, like the first Adam, they think that that's explicitly a man. No, it's actually a man and a woman. It's an androgyne. That's what it is, because Eve is taken from Adam, is extracted from Adam. So this first being that's created, and this is actually, once again, something that when you do comparative mythological study, it's all over the world. Chance, at Interverse, he talks about this kind of stuff all the time. If you do your due diligence, you will find it everywhere. We just covered the Ojibwe story of creation. They literally had this primordial man, same sort of figure, strung between opposites, and their sun god was literally called Jesus. Like when I came to that, I'm like, how? And it's not like that. It's not like it was like the Christian missionaries that came over and made their language. No. That's not what's going on. Somehow this native tribe came up with these same sort of ideas, and even the phonetics of the name are almost identical. So that gets you to this question, like, there's something else going on here. This is not just a bunch of dudes writing some stuff down or whatever. It's in the air, it's in your heart, it's in all around you. And you can discover it. And that is actually what I think the true Christian doctrine is all about, is actually discovering the epistle in your heart, if you will,
That's beautiful. I love that. And could you back up just to let us know how, and I imagine people here know, but I'd love to hear you tell it, just how you became that pattern hunter in the first place. What was a turning point, or what moved you to be that?
Oh, just a general sense of being lost. I mean, just growing up and constantly being inquisitive and trying to figure out what's going on. And at some point, it basically just got to a sort of a fever pitch where it was like it ended up directing towards spiritual religious studies. And, if you just stay on that course, in my perspective, and we could get into alchemy, we could get into all sorts of stuff, that's going to lead you to Christ, and even through those outlets. And that's specifically once again, maybe we can get into this, but when you actually read alchemy, in fact, I was just reading Carl Jung, was like last week, basically talking about how when they say that there's the philosopher's stone, they don't mean that that's a replacement for Christ. They say, when they say, hey, they achieved the philosopher's stone, they're achieving Christhood, if you will, for lack of a better term. So, even through these other avenues, it's like it still leads back to Christ, no matter what. And so when I got to that, it was like, that's interesting, because that's not what I was expecting at all going into this. So, but mainly to answer your question, just searching. I wanted an answer from my life.
Right.
And so,
right. And I heard you say you have no religious upbringing whatsoever, so you came to it with fresh eyes.
that's the beautiful thing. Yeah. My parents did not rear me into, I was surrounded by like Christian doctrines and denominations. Like, I mean, my back, I grew up, my back house used to be a Methodist church. Right across the street was a Christian Scientist. Right down the street was, whatever. So I was surrounded by it, but my parents never raised me under any of that. They were just like, figure it out yourself. And so like even though I wasn't raised Christian, I went into that and was like, God, this is not making sense. I'm asking you some serious questions and you're not giving me a palatable, reasonable answer. And so that forced me to be like, well, okay, well, I'm going to find the answer then. Okay. There's got to be an answer to this. It's either it's all a bunch of nonsense, which that was made clear that it's not, pretty quick. Then it was like, okay, what does it mean? What does it actually mean then? If you don't have the answer and you don't have the answer and you don't have the answer, but all you claim to have the answer, then just explain it to me. So since they didn't, that sent me on the road to, figuring it out, if you will.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so when you say like the philosopher's stone leads to Christhood, or all of that, or not Christ, you said Christhood, or leads you to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you define that maybe indefinable elements of, how do you even call it? What is Christ to you?
Well, it's like the light of all worlds. I mean, when you talk about archetype, we're just going to read this next, it's like literally next chapter. I was just talking about it, John 12. He himself tells his disciples, tells us in the book that he is essentially the exemplar, the example. He's the prototype. He's coming down here and he's going to light the way, the path for eternal life, and basically say, look, if you want to get there, this is the path you got to take. And there is only this path. Okay. That's it. That's just how it is. And that is a path, of course, of virtue and faith and righteousness and of course, repentance of sin, all of that sort of stuff, of course, that we know. So to me, it was like everything was viewed through the lens of Christ. There was no other way to do it in order for it to make sense to me. As a hyper analytical, logical person, there was no other conclusion that I could come to. I was like, oh, we just did. I want to make sense of the Ojibwe people. Okay, the best way to do it was view it through the Christian doctrine, and that's exactly what we did. It's like, oh, here's the parallel. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's the sun god. Here's the twins. Here's the whatever it was. So yeah. So when I say it's like, oh, it's like he basically embodies all of the mysteries. The purpose of existence, the path to God, all of it. So that's how I see it.
And when you say embodies that, do you see that Christ was ever a body, was ever a person in the flesh? Is that part of your paradigm at all?
Yeah, in fact, in the tenets of the order, we write that's I actually believe that that these stories are based on, at least loosely, some individual people that lived, some historical events. I don't think that and not even, I don't think at this point, I'm pretty, at least 100%, 99.9% confident to say that that's not the why scripture's written. That's not what scripture is for. Scripture is not meant to be this sort of thing that you can take as pure history and lay it over top what happened the last 2,000 years. It was never its intention. It's not what it's meant to be. What it really is like an ultra history, or like a transcendent history. It's really, is what we say, mythology, but that the term mythology isn't meant to be like a negation, or it's not meant to be like a put down. What it is, it's embodies universal truths that will always be there. And it is the story of good and evil. It is the story of man's fall and return to God. It is the story of the hero's quest. It is the story of self-sacrifice. It is, all of that. And so, anyway, yeah, I'm sorry, just rambling now.
No, that's lovely. One of the smartest things I heard you say about scripture is that it tells you more about the author than about the subject that it's describing. Can you say more about that?
Did I say that?
You did. You talked fast, so I just pulled out that little, I'm like, oh, that made a lot of sense to me.
Well, I think I will say this: when you read the text in and of itself and just read it for exactly what it is and go to it for, the genuine article, to me, it is going to tell you what the book is, as opposed to going to some sort of theologian or pastor, minister, preacher to say, this is what the book is. My biggest problem with going to them and actually accepting that what they believe the book is to be is that then I say the following questions like, okay, now explain this. What does this mean? Then they provide and have provided loads of Christians essentially nothing. And this is what I've learned being a pastor for the last 3 years and even before that, because at this point, I don't know how many Christians have come to me and said, no one ever made sense of this to me. Nobody, not my Catholic, not my bishop, not nobody. And so it's like, okay, well, that's a problem. Sorry, it just is. It's like your job is to be able to open this thing and say, oh, the parable of the sower, I can tell you why 130 and 60 or whatever, and I'll explain it to you, little Bobby. Isn't that why you go to a teacher or preacher, somebody who's supposed to be an authority on these subjects? So to me, like, to find out that you have this age-old, sacred book, and I go to all of these people that are allegedly the experts of it, and no one can tell me anything. That would be like going to get your car fixed and nobody can replace the muffler. What do you do? Apparently you got to figure out how to replace the muffler yourself, huh? Well, that's what I did,
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, it's like going to the doctor and they can tell you nothing at all. So you end up searching on your own for better health.
Yeah.
The same way. Yeah.
Save a lot of money too.
Also, yeah, it can be a lot of troubleshooting. Since you mentioned it, like the thing that, the war between good and evil, there's one of our opposites. I hope to go deep into that in this interview. And one of the things, I interviewed Mark Archer. I think he's there in Missouri, by the way. I believe he's right in your area.
Oh, okay.
I was introduced to him through Matt Presti, and he says he's studying the Bible from the Hebrew and coming up with some very different conclusions about what it actually says. Things like there was actually 2 creation events and 2 Adams. So that's like, off the map in a different subject. But he says that war between good and evil is not really the truth of it, that it's really between life and death. Do you have anything to relate that to?
I don't know. I would actually kind of disagree with that, because Genesis tells you right away that one of the things that we ate was the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. So when our fall, when we fell down here, one of the main things of knowledge that we have is that, well, 2 things. Number 1, we get to choose. And number 2, there's 2, you can go this way or this way kind of thing, right or left path. So when you actually look at what we're dealing with in the world right now, our biggest issue isn't I'm scared of death. Or like I'm sick. That my biggest issue is the evil in this world that's trying to destroy our economy, trying to destroy being able to buy a house, trying to destroy our religion, trying to destroy our race, trying to destroy our countries. And when you just look back at history, that seems to be the case. I will say this though, more often than not, that battle is in the mind. It's not actually an external thing that it's just like COVID. I was never physically threatened with COVID. Or not just COVID, the like alleged virology or whatever. Not that. I mean, just like the everything about it, right? The whole agenda. I was never physically threatened by that. There was no physical anything. Psychologically and emotionally, though, it was trauma and terrorizing, right? And that was all up here. Now I know that I'm absolutely can handle those situations better because I know that what the battle is up here. It's not actually out here. I was never going to take that facts. So why would I give a crap about anything else? You know what I mean? So.
Right. I think you're absolutely bang on that the vast majority of problems can be solved in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so, I just have to speak to this a little bit from my own perspective, that fear of dying is so incredibly suppressed because it is our biggest pain. And we think I'll talk to people all day long. They'll always tell me they have no fear of dying. But then when they come to some of the work that I do and discover the programming of it, it is formidable, and it's installed, both by our own choice, as it's all by free will, which is maybe the next subject we could go into. But it's also very much capitalized on the fact that we have this, we're programmable at that level of death. So by suppressing it, you think it's not there, it rules you. That's the problem. Everything in the unconscious has power because of the being in the unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely been taught to stay away from anything that would bring uncomfortability or pain or fear or anything. And really, you should really just head first right into it, because that's how you overcome it. And everybody knows that. I mean, as soon as you get any amount of years under your belt, you realize that it's like you have to go through that darkness in order to get to the other side. There's no other way. And if you think there's another way, you're just fooling yourself. And that's so I didn't want to hear that when I was 22, but so
Yeah, now that you're 23, you're good. No, I'm just kidding. That's very good. So how would you tie free will into, say, the alchemy of Jesus? Is that an element, or?
Well, I mean, alchemy is all about, you could say transformation of the soul, right? Is basically transforming yourself to recognize that you go from essentially your lost little sheep to becoming, right, following the shepherd of Christ, for lack of a better term, probably a good term. But so alchemy this is what I mean. Like when I got to alchemy and realized that they were always just like, oh no, it's this, like they were all it was always like the alchemical transformation. The end result was always Christ. So it was like, okay, so whatever transformation you're doing, it's to transform you into this perfected prototypical being. Okay. So the process of alchemy is all about distilling out and getting to the quintessence, if you will, which basically means you do that with everything in your life, everything, virology, cosmology, emotionality, history. Just go down the list and you go through and you find out, you distill all the bullshit out. And you get to that philosopher's stone, that little bit, and that little bit of truth is something you just put in your pocket and always take with you, because now you've distilled out, and that is Christ. And that, by the way, that notion of the philosopher's stone is something that is in the Bible. In fact, I don't know if we can go into it right here, but we actually covered it all in Ezekiel's wheels. You can see where they specifically mention essentially the blue stone, the lapis stone, when we went to Europe. And we went into a bunch of these ancient, Gothic cathedrals, domes, if you will, all over Germany, that sort of stuff. There was numerous paintings where it's like you have basically this blue circular, ball, if you will, right? And it's not the earth or anything like that. It's literally, accordingly, the philosopher's stone. So this is something that most Christians think is something like antithetical, but it's not even close. Like I would say 100% without question or controversy that the Bible is an alchemical text. It is the alchemical text. It's what it is, So
There you go. That's amazing. Now, so much of the Bible is the New Testament makes a lot more sense to me when it comes to like the words of Christ and everything. And then the Old Testament is, a different version of God, the vengeful, murderous, jealous, all of these qualities that I can't find in God. I find them inside myself, but I do not find them in God. And so how do you explain, if you had to, the difference between those two testaments?
It's great. This is another thing that just seems to be completely lost on all Christianity, is that, when you look at the Old Testament, right, what are you, when you read a book, what are you doing? You're reading somebody's, okay, they may have received this from on high as gifts right from God, source direct. Okay, fine. It's still going through the filter of the person, right? So when you look at the Old Testament, you look at the New Testament, right? The Old Testament is written by who? Well, Jews, Hebrews, right? That book was never meant for you and I. That was their book. That's according to their thing. Like, we're the chosen, you're the Goyim or whatever, blah, 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 blah. So now you look at that Old Testament and you look at the God and you're like, he's angry, he's evil, he's vengeful, he's, that sort of thing. And as you're saying, then you get to the New Testament and then you say, well, what is the difference? Is this a different God? According to the Bible, no, it's not. There's no question about it. No one could, if you're, studied up in Christianity, could ever question that that's supposed to be the same God. Well, if it's the same God, then why is it so different? Well, the question then becomes, who's writing it? Whose view of God is it? Okay. Then you have the recognition there's like this sacred old book, Old Testament, and it's all about God. Okay, if it was so sacred and perfect and good, then why would there be a need for a New Testament? Why would there be a need for somebody to come along as Christ does and cleans up the mess, if you will? Now, most Christians don't recognize the fact that, guess what? The Old Testament, the only reason the Old Testament is there, Christians, is so that you have context for your holy book being the New Testament. That's the reason it's there. You're not supposed to go to a Christian church and be like, all right, now we're going to read from Isaiah today and spend months reading from Isaiah. No, you're supposed to be in the New Testament. If something comes up in the New Testament, it's like, hey, and it references scripture, that's what it's there for. But it's crazy to me that when I got to the Bible and started actually reading it for myself, I'm like, I'm going to figure this out, right? That kind of thing. Really just headstrong, right? Kind of, piss and vinegar kind of thing. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't believe it. I was like, how is this missed in Christian churches? Here Christ is coming along, just absolutely calling out right now a lot of Jews and Hebrews for exactly the Satan worship that they're still doing today. And yet you have Christian churches being like, oh, this is good, Israel. It was nuts to me. And that was one of the things that it actually inspired me to try to clarify this to people. I'm like, guys, this is like, what's happening? And the only thing I can say is that this is how much Christianity has been under attack over the years. That's what you have to understand. The reason we have evangelicals in the United States today that are pro-Israel and all that sort of stuff is because Christianity has a full-on onslaught against it for years, for generations now, to water it down, to dumb it down, to make sure that the people don't understand what they're reading, so they won't actually act in accordance to God, if you will. So long story short, when I got there and I started recognizing what was actually going on, I'm like, people need to know this. People need to stop, it's like, so yeah. So there's your answer. Those are two different perspectives. That's what it is. And that's exactly what they say it is. So,
That's brilliant. It's exactly what you were talking about when you said you're learning more about the author, where the author is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so the collection of books that we consider to be the Bible, is it a hodgepodge put together by the Vatican, or, who was it? Constantine, and they decided what books, I'm probably mangling the history, but what books were included, what weren't. There's the Book of Enoch. There's the, what do you call it again? The Nagamati scriptures. How do you view all of that as a collection?
Okay. My perspective has always been at least completely different from any other perspective that I've ever seen about the Bible. And mine was just this. Everybody looks at the Bible and they try to substantiate its history. They try to go back 500 years, 1,000 years, blah, 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 and say, this is what happened. I think any reasonable researcher nowadays should recognize that history is the set of lies agreed upon. The idea that we have 2,000 years of recorded history is absolutely absurd. We can't even tell you what happened in America in 1900s. So my perspective was like, okay, I can't prove if this was history, what happened to it, who changed it, who decided, blah, 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 blah. Even if we have a history of it, there's nothing saying that's actually history. It could be legendary. Just like Knights of the Round Table and, of King Arthur or whatever kind of thing. So I said, okay, instead of trying to go back and figure out its history, let's start from where we are and reverse engineer it. Can I go into the Bible itself with my own analytical skills and research of, classic literature and things like that? Can I go and look at this thing and say, is it ordered? Does it have is it encrypted? Just that sort of stuff. Is there patterns there? Is there, all of the sort of tools that you'd use just to deconstruct William Shakespeare or whatever it is? So I started doing that. And I'm like, look, there's something going on here. There was no question about it, And so that's what I did. I sort of reverse engineered it. And I said, I don't know who wrote it. I don't know who came up with it, who decided, but whoever decided upon this, there's no way it was done willy-nilly. Oh, and I do have to thank my CIA handler, Dave, Flat Earth Dave, because he I have to promote the Flat Earth Sun, Moon, and Zodiac app. Everybody go to the app. Okay.
It's fun. Hi, Dave. Nice to see you. I'm going to see you soon at Acapulco.
So hopefully that answers that question.
Yes, it does. It's so interesting. It's really difficult to read. There was so honestly, how many late nights did I have reading that Old Testament and trying to make sense? I'd come away with it with nothing. I literally couldn't sink my teeth into it. Now, the patterns that you're finding, are they based in I know enough about your work to know that you're aligning it with the stars, or not that you're aligning it, but that it is aligned with the astrological patterns. And, just that I was looking for inspiration. I was looking for some, life, something that would spark me and allow me to grow or see more about myself, or all of that kind of, I couldn't do it. So is it based in the Hebrew itself when you study and you find those patterns, or are you able to pull that out of English Bibles? And is there a Bible that you feel is better?
As far as English, yes, the authorized King James is what we use, and I actually cover specifically why in the book Lord Jesus Christ. I have maybe it's 20 pages or something like that, where we basically cover and look at, like God's Word translation and the New International Version, and basically show how they're all completely botched. I mean, some of them are it's embarrassingly bad, right? I mean, no one in the world would ever do to what they did to that Bible, they would do the same to William Shakespeare. No one would take William Shakespeare and dumb down William Shakespeare, right? But somehow they did it with the Bible, right? So when I started looking at that was an immediate problem with me, because I'm like, look, I know classic works of literature. You would never go into whatever the Iliad and Odyssey and make it dumb. But that's exactly what they did with the Bible. So I went and I said, okay, well, we have to find out which English Bible would be quote unquote correct. That immediately took me to the authorized King James, because it's just far and away. And I explain why a better text in a million different ways, right? Just how it's ordered, the pattern, the way that's written, everything about that. So, as far as my perspective is concerned, whoever translated the original King James and translated it into modern English, however that was done, whether it was the hand of God or whatever, it was divinely inspired. There, at this point, with the encodings that are already in there, there's no other conclusion I can come to. I have to come to that conclusion, So, I don't think it's just stuck in Hebrew or Greek. You know what I mean? I think it's absolutely available in our language. So.
Right, because I see you using the English words of Jesus. Isn't that a Latin word, for example, his name, Jesus?
It could translate it from, because Latin would be IESUS, right? And so that was translated into Jesus. And then we also have the recognition that we have in a certain time, once again, we don't really have the history. It's really sketchy, the history, that we have the addition of, J and W, I think is what it is, right? Into the alphabet. And we don't know who did that? When did it happen? When was it decided? Did people just en masse started using? We don't that history is essentially gone. So to go back and try to suss it out is impossible. But what we can do is, like I said, reverse engineer and say, is there an organized pattern within our language that proves that it's not just some sort of mishmash, humdrum, cobbled together mess? And what I'm saying is absolutely you can. And at this point, show that our language is brilliant. The English language is, I think it's a masterpiece. It absolutely is. So.
Nice. That's good. I love that. And then Billington Bear said that he'd like, maybe it's not a bear, I'll leave that part out, but he'd like to get one of your Bibles. Do you publish Bibles?
Yes, we do. We have our own Bibles. And then my wife makes rosaries and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Nice. So, you can visit the website, GnosticAcademy.org. And I'd like to have one of those as well. So I can't help but to go into this subject. So here's another one that's, really spooky. I know you get a lot of projection from people about it around, and can we even say the words without getting censored, especially on YouTube, is the Masons. If I leave out the free word, I'll just set it. There you go. And, and so King James was a Mason, was he not?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, that's just one
No.
of
In
the
fact,
rumors.
Freemason, yeah, I mean, the actual organization of Freemasonry was started, I think, almost 100 years after King James was around.
Okay,
So,
okay,
yep.
so that's just an accusation because that's why they want to take out that Bible as credible.
Okay. Well, so this is a huge problem within the truth community, like right now, is the conversation with Freemasonry. Number one, like you could easily say Freemasonry on any show, and you're never going to. Thank you, Jennifer. You're never going to get censored, right? Like, I mean, you can just bash on them, that sort of thing. The problem with that people have with Freemasonry is that they're assuming what Freemasonry is, as opposed to, once again, going to the genuine article and finding out what it's about. I started our church because of Freemasonry, and people ask me, it's like, what was like one of the one things that brought you to, speak about Christ and the Bible and open a church? Freemasonry, 100%. Why? Well, because I've been studying Freemasonry since 27 years old, and I mean, I have been dedicated to it. I probably read more Masonic books than anybody that you've ever met, right? And everything I'd heard about online about Masonry is they're devil worshippers, it's evil, and it's the furthest thing from the truth. It's the furthest thing from the truth. Freemasonry is all about bettering yourself, making yourself a better man, giving yourself up to your community, sacrificing yourself for the betterment of your fellow man, raising other people up, doing charity, being philanthropic. That was the thing that actually got me. I have some members in our church, and they had said, hey, we have family members that are Masons, like my grandpa or whatever, and they were wonderful people. The most giving, kind, hardworking people you've ever met. And then I go online and everybody trashes them. Well, the only reason that they trash them is because they've never researched any of it. If you research it, as I said, what will actually happen, if you're honest with it, you'll come to the exact same perspective that I do. Because I was forced to. I was like, no, this is amazing. Freemasonry is all about being a better man, period. That's what it is. Anybody that says anything else, you're just deluding yourself. One of the ways that I actually uncovered the cipher to literally decode the Bible was through Freemasonry, So I'm a defender of it, and people don't like that. I was like, I don't really care at all, because I know what it's really all about. And when I actually show this to my audience, as opposed to just listening to other people say, yeah, it's all demon worship, then I actually read from the text and show it, and then say, okay, here's, I'm about to read a poem by a Mason next, next sermon. It's like, when's the last time you turned on a YouTube channel and they were reading the poetry of Albert Pike or whatever? It doesn't happen, because they're not honest with the subject. So, so I'm 100% pro Freemasonry. We extol the virtues of Freemasonry. I teach about its symbolism, and I try to correct the record from people. These are not Satan worshipers. The furthest thing from it. Most of them are geeks. They're nerds. They are. They're book geeks. That's what they are. So,
Right. And is there any part of it that has been, because I had somebody early on go that was a certain amount of the way into the relationship, and then they tried to turn me on to Freemasonry, and they were saying, but Freemasonry's not all bad. So it was one of those statements that made it seem like, okay, yeah, there is some good that you're obviously finding in the literature and all of that kind of thing. And then has it been taken, like many things, and usurped and went dark? They went dark with it. Does that exist that you're aware of?
I would say that, because that's what usually people ask, and I would say, compared to Christianity, not even close. Meaning Christianity itself has been 10,000 times more, just even the Bible conversation alone. The fact that these Bibles are being translated horrifically, that alone should tell you that Christianity has been way more perverted than the Masonic doctrine has. The reason that Masonry gets such a bad rap is essentially because of bad research. It's actually not because Masonry's been perverted or distorted or anything like that. If anything, the reason I'm not a Mason is because Masonry's been pretty watered down. It's no longer the robust sort of esoteric mystical what Masonry is, mind you. Let's just cover this a second. It is a science of allegory veiled in symbolism, is basically what it is. It's a science of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated in symbolism. That's what it is. And so, most of the doctrine, most of the Masons anymore are not into that sort of stuff, because what Masonry really should be doing is teaching you the 7 classic liberal arts and actually educating you about all the things that I'm teaching. But it's, like I said, it's so watered down now that I mean, instead of me joining Masonry, I started my own church just to teach essentially the true principles of it, if you will. So, you know.
Right. Yeah, I have a few friends that have joined, local Mason chapters, if they're called that, and for them, it's networking that they end up knowing the right person, and then they get the job instead of some other guy would get the job, and that it's more about those relationships, and
Which,
so.
if I don't want to stop you, but
Go ahead.
that's actually one of the really beneficial things about Masonry. People think that that's like, oh, well, they go in there and then they work with one another. Yeah, of course they do, because you want to work with people that are upstanding and hardworking. Like, I would get hired from a lot of these jobs. Why? Not because I would be a Mason or something, because I'm showing that I'm a hardworking guy. I'll show up to the job. I'm going to be, I'm going to stand by all of that sort of stuff. So that's, so, the networking part of it that's still around is actually a really big part of it, because you want to work with people that are good, right? Upstanding, moral, godly people, so.
Exactly. And that's the reason to have your own church, and in my case, my own association, so that you're going to be around people who you can relate to, you share values with, you share some common goals, enough for you to be able to work together. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. And
so a lot of those things are, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of hello, there's my wonderful neighbor. Anyone who lives in a roundhouse is all right, man. But see, he knows what's up. Speaking of a roundhouse, I need another one. So.
There you go. I'd like a roundhouse too. That sounds great to me. And so Mike's asking, is there a more complicated compartmentalized history that might confuse truthers continually? Or is it just an outright attack on something good?
No, I mean, this is the problem. It's not even like a compartmentalized thing. It's like no one is actually reading the text. No one's actually going and being genuine with it. And that's what I found. And it still happens today. I mean, I bitch about it all the time, because it's like, no, just, so people just assume secrets, a bunch of guys down at the lodge, and then it's just evil and, that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, no, it's just nothing of the sort. I mean, I don't even know what else to say, I promote it against the face of like all of these people hating on it, because I absolutely know what it is, and I can stand in everything I say. I'll talk to any of these people, whatever, because I know what you're doing is not you, but what you're doing is basing your things off superstitions and biases, and I can point right to the source, so it's just the difference. That's all,
Right. And so, what do you consider to be the roots of Satanism?
Judaism. Actually, I'll say this. I mean, the one of the biggest issues of one of the biggest cornerstones of Satan, a satanic ideology, is the sacred and profane. Is the sacred and profane ideology. Now, I would say this. I'm actually like, I don't dismiss the sacred and profane ideology, meaning people can make themselves with their own free will and their own actions profane. Okay. And I have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is the sacred and profane inherent. Like, I'm born of a certain stock, a certain race, a certain religion. So therefore, I'm inherently better than you. That is right there the core of a satanic ideology, because what you're doing is essentially saying that you're not equal, that we're not equal. And not only that, that the golden rule, essentially, if you will, to dumb it down, is inapplicable. Right? I don't need to treat you like a human being because I'm of a special kind. I'm a stock of this race or whatever. And that is a core of Satanism, I would say, because it allows you to treat people however you wish, because they're not necessarily people. So, if I may, that was one of the things that Jesus brought. Right? That's,
Right.
Was like, whether, what is it? Barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, Christ is in all, Greek, Jew, that sort of thing, right? Before, it was just for a special people, the high priests and that sort of thing. Christ comes along, is like, nope, it's for everybody. And they hated him for it, didn't they?
Exactly.
So,
I heard you talk about this, and I love reading this in the Bible from Jesus' teachings about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. And then I watched how the vast majority of people, even though it's right there and he says it over and over and over, and then most people go into this letter of the law, become the Pharisee that is judging and measuring and year in and year out and all of this. It was like, wow, this is a complete mismatch. How do you think that happened?
Well, this is what I would say. This is, getting back to the conversation about the fact that Christianity has been under severe attack for a very long time. That's one of the symptoms of it, I would say. And I don't think there's really anything needs to be more said more than that kind of thing. The Christian doctrine is the one thing that actually brings hope and to everybody. And that these people want to destroy that. It's as simple as that.
Right. There you go. Yeah. So fun. Where should we go from here? Maybe back to the beginning. So the themes of death and rebirth, obviously very, very prominent in the life of Jesus. I have heard you talk a few times. I need your book on Jesus for sure. And how astrologically you've got a constant cycle of death and rebirth. It is how, like our mutual friend Ben Balderson would say, we had a stream here, that life comes from death and destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you talk about how that is both like a practical and allegorical truth?
Yeah, well, I mean,
no pressure.
No, yeah, no. Let's first start here. Like, these things are like they're just available in nature, right? Like, so whenever you go to the scripture and you see something that it's like, oh, you need to be reborn through Christ, that idea should be able to be found within your natural experience. That was always my take. Like, if there's something in the Bible that makes sense, or there's an ultimate truism, I should be able to say, I don't care about your stupid Bible, and I should be able to go into my experience and see that. Right. And be like, oh, there it is. That's when I can know it's true. Not just because a book says it, but because this is what Gnosis really is all about. It's the experience. Right. So when you talk about death and rebirth, right, this is what everything is doing all the time. And there is no death. There is no birth without the death. This is the Trinitarian doctrine. And this is why it's so crazy to me that, like, you can talk to Catholics and you can talk to Orthodox and you can talk to bishops or, Baptists and Methodists, and you can just go down the line and ask them what the Trinity is. And they're going to give you 10,000 different, explanations. Nobody. I remember there was an argument or a debate or whatever with, made by Jim Bob and Owen, and they were debating the Trinity or whatever. And I was watching the live chat, and there was like thousands of people that were all arguing what the Trinity is, and they could not even agree. But they're supposed to be Christians. It's like, what in the world happened? So what is the Trinity? Okay, the Trinity is specifically the notion of death and rebirth. So when, the Trinitarian doctrine is understood all across the world, right? I repeat myself all the time because apparently I need to, whatever. But, the Trinitarian doctrine is past, present, and future all becoming one. So the future creates, the past destroys, and ultimately they merge into the center, which is the second person of the Trinity, which is Christ. There's Father, the Creator. There's Christ, which is the preserver, which is the preserver of our eternal lives, which he's always in the present. And then you have the past, which is a reference to death, destruction, or that sort of thing, a passing, right? Creating, passing. Well, this is what ghost or spirit is. So a ghost or a spirit is specifically a reference to the ethereal, or, whatever, if you want to say the non-immaterial worlds. So you have the Creator, which creates the material world. It happens in the material world, then it passes on. So the entire doctrine of the Trinity is all about birth from death, if you will, death and rebirth. That's what the whole thing is about. And it's crazy to me. It's absolutely nutter butters insane that I can ask thousands of Christians and no one can just give me that simple explanation. I can do it today. I could go over and ask Andrew Wilson at the Crucible, what does the Trinity mean? And he'll give me some convoluted explanation as opposed to just telling me exactly. And that to me is a huge issue. Like, I can't even express to you that there are Christians out there that can't even understand the fundamentals of their three becoming one, but they're supposed to be Christians. Well, I'm going to do my best to clean that house, clean that up, because it's a mess. It's ridiculous, So anyway.
That's fun. I like that a lot. So many places to go. I heard you use the word Damon, and I glommed onto that word Damon. And I made it mean something for myself. Not everybody defines it this way, but I'm curious what you think. And so when two forces come together, we'll just use a man and a woman, and they come together and they make a third. They make a baby, a new life. And it's kind of a Damon, or even just you and I speaking on this podcast right now. it's creating a third. And it might be in inclusion with everybody who's tuning in and everybody who will tune in as well, that it creates its own kind of soul. Is that how you would describe a daemon?
I mean, I always saw Damon as like, sort of like Damon and demon. So a demon would be of course, like a negative, obviously, right? But a daemon was more of a helper. That's how I always understood it. So I wrote a song a long time ago called "The Song for the Daemon," and I did it because at the time I was really into trying to figure out how I wrote songs. Like, how did a song come about? And so it just got me thinking, because I'd done it so many times in my life at that point, right? Where I was just, you'd sit down, next thing you know, and 20 minutes later, an hour later, there's some song and it came out of nowhere. You have no. So it got me thinking. I was like, okay, well, where does this stuff come from? So when I like analyzed my own thought process on it as it was happening, it absolutely feels like something's being given to you. That's what it feels like. And then I've talked to numerous other musicians that have basically told me in so many words the same thing. Like when you get a riff or you hear, it's like you're hearing it in the ether, and all you're doing is that I call it like being a stenographer for the Lord, if you will. Basically what you're doing is like it's out there and you're just like trying to pick it up. Oh, that's the melody right there. There it is. Like what? And then basically you come down and you interpret this thing, but that's like sort of given to you. So that being, if you will, that sort of grants you that, I always consider that a daemon. And so when I wrote a song for Damon, it was like a song for the being that gave me the song, if you will.
How beautiful.
So, yeah.
And I do highly recommend your music, and you generously have it for streaming at gnosticacademy.org. And I saw you have a songbook. I want to sing along to all that music. So I'm going to get your songbook and learn the words too.
Thank you.
And yes, of course. Yeah, beautiful. I love that interpretation. And it is so given to you. I'm the same way these days. I end up inadvertently singing to my water distiller, speaking of distilling, because it has a hum and it's got a very specific tone. So it ends up being this drone in my mind. I run my distiller like almost all day sometimes. And then next thing you know, I'm singing along to the distiller. And all of this, and it's just in the ethers, it's just waiting. All of the notes are floating around and there's all kinds of things coming through. So I completely relate to that it's not me constructing out of my mind what's the next note or the word or anything. It's just coming through.
It goes right to this idea too, when it looks, and you like think of this mystically as like Jesus is the word, right? And you're always supposed, like, silent listen, they're anagrams. You're always supposed to listen. Like, and that's what I found, like in the creative realm, like you have to get into a space where it's like a flow state and you're not like actually thinking, you're actually listening. You're actually like, when every day I write a poem / prayer for the church, right? Every morning, right? Or most days, right?
Beautiful.
And like, yeah, that's how I do it. I just get into that state of receiving. I just wait. And then, there's a line. Oh, yeah. Okay. And then it's like, there's a puzzle, and it's like the puzzle's out there. It's already finished, but you have to go and like, oh, okay. And that's not like work. It's receiving. It's being in the space and just being able to grab it. And, and I don't know, I've just learned to work that muscle over the years. And it would be really easy for me to be like, I made all this stuff. Look how awesome I am. Right. But I can't say that because that's not true. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I am just the interpreter kind of thing. So anyway.
Exactly. I'm going to grab a link to your Telegram. It's such a beautiful group over there. So if anybody is not already in, then you can join. It says at Marty Leeds. Maybe that's not clickable. But on Telegram, it is the Gnostic Church and Academy of the Lord Jesus Christ, just in case you can't find that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And can you unpack that? Jesus is the Word. That's what we're listening for, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So here's a bunch to talk about here. So, one thing that before I ever got to like the doctrine of Christ and just going through the Bible and stuff like that, one of the things that always got me was the language, right? But like we use language, we're using language right now to explain the world to one another, right? And yet none of us even have any idea of like what language really is. Like, how did it form? How did languages form? How did we get this capacity? It is completely metaphysical. There's no physicality to language whatsoever, right? I mean, you can feel vibrations and stuff, but it's metaphysical, supernatural. It's part of the natural world, but it's not like a material thing. So to me, it was like I started analyzing just speaking and language and that sort of stuff. And it's like one of the most magical things in the world, right? And yet hardly we ever stop to actually analyze it and be like, what is this thing, right? So when you get to things like, okay, Jesus is the word, or you hear like the tetragrammaton, right? The tetragrammaton is known as the holy name of God, right? And gramma is a reference to grammar. So then you look at all this, all of these terms and things like that, and it's like they're all pointing to speaking, language, and alphabets, right? Even Jesus, I am the Alpha and the Omega. That's symbolically saying he's the entire Greek alphabet, right? The Alpha and the Omega, right? I'm beginning and the end, but beginning and the Greek alphabet is Alpha and Omega kind of thing. So that got me thinking is God in our alphabet? Is God, his presence available in the very words that we speak? Yeah, that's the point. So like this notion that God is always eternally present and with us and everything like that, then it's like, oh, he's also in our language. Then it gets to that whole thing of like the power of our words and what we speak, abracadabra, our free will and our ability to magically create what we want in this world. That's directly related to this. Like, holy shit, like that puts a lot of palatability and like, what do I want to say? What do I want to say? Just like a esoteric richness or whatever to our language and speaking and all of it, and none of that's ever discussed in Christianity, Hi, Lisa.
Indeed. That's nice. And Billington shared your Telegram link. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, being the word. So Jesus, right, so basically when God said, let there be light, right? So God spoke all of creation into creation. That was the idea, right? So the notion that we speak our own world into creation is we're made in his image. So we have that sort of same power. So then you get to the point of like, let's talk about this. You get to the point of like, Jesus is the word that breaks all magic spells, right? So it's like this powerful word that always brings us back to truth, always brings us back to the path of, that sort of thing, God's path, that sort of thing. So now let's talk about this. I wanted to mention this. I'll probably talk about it Sunday too. They're pulling out hate speech laws right now, right? Like in Australia, they're trying to pass them here and that sort of stuff. Well, one of the things about the doctrine of Christ is that and if you adhere to the word, meaning speak language, a Christian accordingly, if he's a proper Christian, can't ever engage in hate speech, because we don't hate. Do we? No. I don't hate even my worst enemy. I do not hate. That doesn't mean I don't want justice served. That doesn't mean I don't want them brought in for their crimes that they've committed. But there's nothing about what I do that hates anything. That's not part of my vocabulary. That's not part of my belief. Okay. So the way I can take that position is what? Through Christ, because Christ says that we don't hate, right? You love your enemy. That's what you're commanded to do. You're to love your God, your fellow man, and your enemy. So right now, our enemies are trying to say, by your speech, you have hate. Well, the one thing that gets us out of this legally is Christ, period. Because if you're going to make the accusation, come to my channel or my house or my church and tell me what's in the core of my heart, when I know what is in the core of my heart, that's Christ. You can't possibly ever claim that I'm engaged in hate speech. And why do they want to do that? So you can't criticize Satan worshipers, essentially. So when I say there's a word that breaks all magic spells, that if you want to break the magic spell of hate speech, become a Christian. It's that simple.
There you go. Yeah, they would have brought Jesus up on plenty of charges for hate speech.
Of course, right?
Yeah. And if he was around today. And then you talked about, like, is it a kind of alchemy? And like using the alphabet, using the letters, using the words, putting out in the ethers, creating through your words. Is that an alchemy? And then also with, I think you talked about the numbers 0 through 9, those 10 digits being archetypes unto themselves. If I understood correctly?
Yes, this is once again what Kabbalah is. So I bring up a lot of these terms that a lot of people freak out about, but they really need to be clarified. The reason I do this and I do it so boldly is because I realize that people have a lot of these things misconstrued. You say Kabbalah, immediately all the things in people's brains start firing. It's like demon worship and some sort of Jewish weird rituals or something. It's like no, they have their own Kabbalah, whatever, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Kabbalah specifically is the study of number symbolism. That's what it is. So when we look at the 10 emanations of God and those numbers and how they're related to our language, right? So when we look at like the 10 emanations of God, that's what the Kabbalistic doctrine is all about, known mainly through Judaism because they keep up their stuff so well, basically, right? So the 10 emanations are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's the 10 digits. That's what it is. So, and then we look at those and how they relate to language and that sort of stuff. But all of those are archetypes. They are. Like it just as you explained, right? They're axiomatic archetypes. They're archetypes that were created by God himself, right? And that is a language. That's what it is. We can communicate with math in all sorts of different ways, right? The numbers themselves are essentially numeric letters. And when you create a numeric word, you take those numeric letters and create a word. So math itself is a language. It has an alphabet. And not only that, it can be brought down to essentially, not even essentially, absolutely without a question or controversy, 10 basic principles in which the world is organized from. And this is what these master Kabbalists understood. This notion is, it's not some Jewish thing at all. Like, you know, it's like I learned it from Greeks, you know what I mean? There's Greek Kabbalists that were looking at the Greek alphabet. I'm an English Kabbalist. I mean, I do other things, but I look at the English alphabet and say, hey, this is the alphabet. Here's the divine mathematics behind it. And here's what it decodes and that sort of stuff. So it's just like Freemasonry. People assume what something is. They go with that bias. And if they just actually hack that down and just walk past and actually looked at it for the genuine article, you're going to see that none of this stuff is anything of what you thought. And actually what it does is give you unbelievable amounts of clarity, you know, like on all of these subjects. And so that's why when I came to it, I was like, well, I don't care what anybody says about it. I'm looking at it for exactly what it is. I don't need somebody to tell me what it is if I can just look at it and prove it. So that was the difference with me going into those subjects, because I just went in with full, you know, just like, you know, once again, piss and vinegar. And I was like, I'm just going to figure this stuff out myself. So
Brilliant. And so then the numbers, you said there were 10 basic principles. I don't know if you want to go into them. I have a feeling that will unfold like a big book as well, but you're welcome. You also mentioned axiomatic versus what would be made up archetypes. Would you think that there's ones that are truly come with God's installation, and then others that we concoct? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, we could basically say, I mean, when you look at like a hero archetype, that's nothing that's fabricated in the mind of man. That's just there, right? You know what I mean? But you could look at like the archetype of the trans person or something, you know, something that's literally fabricated and made up, and it's actually not real. Like, no, that person has a penis kind of thing. You see what I mean? Like that kind of thing, whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, when you look at things like the tarot deck, that's all archetypes. And you studying those is actually studying all sorts of things, patterns of the sky, psychological, like you get into the Fool or what, you know, all that sort of stuff. We don't need to go there, but that's all there. That's a huge teaching tool, and it's all done through symbolism and, if you will, archetypes. So.
Right. And is it possible that we can take God's creation that is axiomatic and then just bastardize it? Do you think that's like just basically building on what's already there? Or do we have the ability to create new archetypes?
Well, I don't know about that, but they're definitely bastardizing that which is sacred now. I mean, that's one of the biggest things about like opening a church is resacralization of these things, is getting to the core of what they really mean, recognizing why they're sacred, pointing out why they're sacred, teaching them so other people can understand, so we can move forward with heart intelligence, if you will, on these things, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. And does the profane oppose the sacredness?
For others, yeah, for sure, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Inherently inherently profane, if you will. I mean, they think they're inherently sacred, of course. So, you know, but they're bastardizing the world. I mean, even the manipulation of things like our cosmology or whatever, history, that sort of stuff. That's all bastardizing the sacred, you know?
Yeah,
So.
indeed. And then maybe let's segue into talking about oppositions and how you talked about the language. We just use it. It's a functional, practical tool we use every day, and we don't study it and how it's constructed. So I give myself the task of creating a talk for an Acapulco called The Marriage of Opposites.
Nice.
And I have a tool called Marriage of the Opposites, and I can help people when they're having opposition with a part of themselves within the pendulum of a program itself, which is another big subject, or with another person in their life that's still really in themselves, then I can help them resolve that, not by um, muting or depressing. To me, that's how society has come along with its bastardized version of this marriage of the opposites, is to, neutralize the genders, for example, to say there's no man, there's no woman, and we're going to get to this half man, half woman situation. But really all it's done is completely suppressed both the masculine and the feminine at the sides, as if that I don't see as separate at all. And then there's the true marriage of the opposites, when they as if come together, to be seen that they're not separate, just to receive the charge and the tension that's there, the resistance, literally electricity that shows up between them. So that's what I know about it. And then here I'm facing this talk, and I have to talk for 45 minutes on a subject that really I've only practiced. So at least I have that practical side. But then you start to look at like how replete oppositions are in our language. We might not have language without all of those opposites.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your take on this subject? I have a feeling you've gone real deep in this one.
Yeah, I mean, this basic thing is essentially the cornerstone of all of alchemy. Like when you get to the coincidentia oppositorum, this is the unity of opposites, the harmony of polarities, whatever you want to call it, right? That is at the core of all of the teachings, period, right? And it's basically the notion that in this world, you have these what are construed as opposites, but ultimately you have to recognize that they come from the same source. And in that holding essentially two, anterior ideas together at once, it allows this sort of better third one to arrive. Like you could even say like, oh, we ate from the knowledge of good and evil. Well, we want to go towards good, don't we? Well, yeah, don't get me wrong, but there's good and evil, and then there's great. You see what I'm saying? Like that kind of thing. So the entire universe is created with this fundamental idea. Let's start. Okay, let's just point out a bunch of them, right? Yeah. So first off, you have spirit and matter. This is in your experience. Once again, it's Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven, the spirit, and the earth, right? Genesis 1:1. But do you really need a book to go out and recognize that? No, you can absolutely experience that. What's above your head? It's all metaphysical. It's all things you can't touch. It's beyond your reach. They don't even necessarily have a physicality. Clouds and rainbows. And as far as we can tell, the sun, the moon, the planets, they're not physical things. You can't touch them. No one's ever touched them. So then we have our material. Well, that means your entire experience is created with these opposites. And it's not just the opposites like left and right. It's the unification of them, because you don't just experience earth. You experience heaven and earth, right? Then you look at, look at the cipher, right? The first time I did the cipher, basically what I did is I used the coincidentia oppositorum in order to build it, right? I basically separated A through M and N through Z. So now there's two parts of a singular alphabet that are unified as one. Then we look at the one side, and I basically went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then in that middle pair, I just mirrored. I just did the exact opposite, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So now there's an opposite. It's and then not only, it's just, so it's like even the structure of your experience, the structure of your alphabet. How about the three-dimensional mathematics of you? Forward, reverse, up, down, left, right. That's like it all comes together in one. So this notion of the coincidentia oppositorum leading to essentially enlightenment is in the Bible as well. It's in Revelation, where it basically says there's no need for the sun and moon because it's light all the time in God's heaven. Well, that's the completion of the alchemical wedding. That's what it is. Now you get into the subject of alchemy. This is what I mean. Like you get into alchemy and they show it a different way. They'll show it as a man and woman united, or a man and woman on one body. But the reason that they're showing you that is because they want you to look at that and be like, why is there a man and woman on one body? Like, what the hell does that mean? Like, why is there two heads on this eagle that are pointed in opposite directions? What is it telling you? Coincidentia oppositorum is what it's telling you. So then, sorry, don't mean to keep ranting here. Then we look at astrology. Astrology is all based on that. Everything. the top to bottom, right? Sun and the moon, those are your opposites, right? Even in your traditional 7-house zodiac, of course, which is what we use, you have Jupiter, Jupiter, Saturn, Saturn, Mars, Mars, Venus, Venus, right? Then you even look at the constellations. You have the Great Square of Pegasus, and you have the Circlet Crown, which is right above it, right? You have Cassiopeia, and you have Cepheus, the king and the queen. You have Hydra and Hydrus, the 2 water serpents. You know what I mean? Like, you just keep, you have the Leo major, Leo minor. You have Ursa major, Ursa minor. You have, etc. Canis major, Canis minor. It's like this idea is everywhere, and so basically the notion is to recognize, is psychologically, is to bring all those things together and realize where they came from, and that's the one source of everything, and that gets into oneness and unity with God and that sort of stuff, but anyway.
That's beautiful. I love that. And but within that, so our word opposite has an inherent meaning. And so I'm wondering, is there some level of weaponization of this otherwise, natural at the base of creation, everything comes from it. And then there's so many opposites that they truly don't oppose. So up and down don't oppose. It's a reference point. Wherever you are, you're going to have a version of up and a version of down, and they're not opposite. It's highly functional, because if you're down and you want to be up, you need to know which one is which.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think that there's something of this frame of opposites that puts us in unnecessary opposition with our ideas, like heaven and earth do not oppose?
Yeah, well, they
Spirit and
definitely, they definitely use it in all sorts of ways. But I mean, just even politically, obviously, right? A house divided cannot stand, right? United we stand, you divided we fall. So obviously realize, like, if you want to solve the issue of politics in America, whatever, the first thing you have to do is transcend the opposites. You're never going to solve anything if you have Democrats and Republicans constantly fighting. And this is well known. This is in the Bible. This was written by the founding fathers or whatever, basically saying that, look, if we can't unify on basic principles, it's going to divide, and this country's going to go to shit. And that's exactly what's going on right now. So they understand the divide and conquer kind of thing, because what is the divide and conquer based on? Which is exactly what we're talking about, so
yeah, I call it a pendulum swing. People end up on that, they're right, and then they hate the right for those reasons, and then they go left, and then they end up hating that, and then they go. So we're always, and internally it works exactly the same way, just swinging between the opposites, but never actually finding the enlightenment that is inherently inside them.
Yes, and I think sometimes in your spiritual quest, going to the extremes is necessary, right? Like, you could have some sort of aesthetic time, or what am I trying to say? Where you're just like giving up food and whatever, like, and all meditating all the time. But you can't stay in that forever. You can't just go up to the cold mountain and hang out for months. No, you have to come down too and participate in society. And I think a true spiritual person kind of needs both of it, right? You can't just do the one or the other. It's kind of be like, you have to have the whole totality of the experience. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the god Hanuman in the Indian pantheology. I went to India 8 times and studied a lot and wrote a lot of mantras. I'm going to send you some music, by the way. It was
Cool.
my old life. And Hanuman is the one that straddles the worlds. The asana, or the posture that is symbolized by Hanuman, is the splits. So you couldn't be further in one world as you are in that other world, and straddling and bridging the worlds as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I think it says a lot too about, like, our experience here, because a lot of times people are like, it's they hate the world, or, it's like, well, there's a lot of ups and downs here. There's lots of good and evil. There's good times and bad times. And I think ultimately it's seeking out the balance. That's always what it's going to be. You know what I mean? So, anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. So I'm a rebel among people that talk balance. One of my slides for my talk is that balance is bullshit. Now, it might not actually oppose the way that you're using it, so I'm completely open to that. But say you were talking about love, and the love that has the opposite called hate. And then people think that somehow you need to go and balance these two and have, experiences of both. But what I've discovered is that this love with an opposite, the hate, is a program that's all based in fear. The whole thing, the love and the hate, and all of the positions in between that. And then, so the purpose, once you found an opposition like that inside yourself, is to get off the map of the pendulum that has you swing, right? Who's not familiar with that experience where you fall in love and it's just all love and you can only love them, and all of a sudden they do a wrong thing and you hate them and you couldn't hate them more. And how people talk about their exes is phenomenal, like that they would even procreate with that person that they hate so much. And so, and good and evil, you would never want to balance good and evil, right? You're not going for the evil quality.
No, yeah, this is what I mean. Like, so like when we talk about balance, like specifically like in a even like a Egyptian Book of the Dead sort of thing, like at the end of your life, you like your weight on the scale. Ultimately, you want the thing to be balanced. You don't want it to be doing this sort of stuff because, as I was saying, that allows you to have the third point where you're not stuck in an opposite all the time. This is actually what the balance, just like in a triangle, the balance is brought by the third point. It's not this. You see what I'm saying? So when we talk about like love and hate, one of the things that I think we actually have to balance down here is not to say that, oh, we have to balance inside, or we have to have some hate and some good. It's that we are in a world where, guess what? There is evil, though, right? And that somehow, in some way, we have to sort of maintain this sort of balance and not let it, tip the apple cart over, that sort of thing. And we're always going to be faced with that here on Earth. We will always be faced with it, no matter who it comes, when we come down here, when it is, that sort of thing. So, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. So.
It could, because it becomes a balancing act. You have to act that, and you stay on the map. If you use the teeter-totter as a metaphor for that, some people would say like, oh, go be at the fulcrum where the stillness is. But to me, you're still on the map.
This is actually cosmological too, though. So when we talk about the North Star, right, which is, we actually just talked about this with like the Ojibwe and like the Cherokee, and you can find this all over the world, where there was the point that's literally in the center. It's not opposites, it's not west or east, it's not that sort of stuff. It's in the center and the top, and in that center, everything is still. It's the still point. You know what I mean? Because then what you're not is tossed about and turned about, thrown about with the opposites, that sort of stuff. This is essentially like spiritually where you're to get to, right? So that way, if like, once again, if you have that spiritual center and calmness, when something like COVID happens again, you're not tossed about doing this and that sort of thing. It's like, no, I know exactly what's up. I'm just going to stay this course. You're not going to mess with me. And that is a strength, I would say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a superpower. And I might just be splitting words in this context. So do you feel like that, say, I've heard you talk about how we're going to, face the judgment day, the pearly gates, and you've seen that as a valid thing, that all cultures have their way to say you're going to, meet the scale, and it's going to balance, or not balance, but it's going to measure. And is that like the good deeds against the bad deeds? And then you hope you had more good than you had bad, or is that something different?
Well, I mean, I think the ability to, I'll say this, and this is not a cop-out at all, because, we actually talk about this in explaining how like we experience our creation, stuff like that. I think once you get to a point where you're up and out of here, you're out of a body, and you start talking about what happens after you're into the metaphysical, I think we lose the ability to talk about it. I think we lose it's just like a psychedelic trip. Anybody that's had a solid psychedelic trip and you're like, okay, come back and explain it. You're like, oh, like there's not, and that's, like I said, I'm not saying that as a cop out, but so when we talk about like, hey, you cross the gates of death and you're going to go get your life review and stuff like that. The one thing I wanted to point out to most people is that they assume that it's like this, oh, God's just going to put the DVD of your life in, and oh, you screwed up here and you screwed up here and stuff like that. That to me, it was never what it was about. What the life review was about is basically looking at your life, and not only looking at the things that you may have done wrong so that you can fix them, but also the positive things that you did. So that at the life review, my perspective would be that it's not God looking over you being like, look what you did down there. It's you now viewing your life through your own eyes, except now you don't get to make excuses. Now you don't get to be like, well, I did this because I would, none of that. Then you get to see through your life then and say, was this noble enough to be welcomed up with the rest of the saints up there? Do you think that the life you lived was loving and caring? Did you help out? Did you do the best that you could? That sort of stuff. That's how I see the life review. So to me, it goes right back to not some like external thing that's looking at you and judging you. It's like, no, you get to the core of who you are and you get to see it and say, how'd you do? And look at, and answer what you always have to do anyway, right? You have to always answer to what's in here, which is of course God. God's in there too, But so that's how I view that anyway.
Nice. Death is the best truth teller. And I know that from having faced my death at 29 and having been on what I thought was my deathbed. And that life review is very true. You really take inventory and like, who have I been and what have I done? And it all comes rushing at you. And on the other side of not dying, then people very often are very transformed by that because they see the error in their ways. They can repent. They have much greater knowledge. Now, I'm always a poster child for you don't need to get to that point before you start really seeing, is your life, is it of service to other people, even yourself, or is it a wasted life? Which is kind of deadly to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To me, like, it's nothing that I'm fearful of, mainly because I like inherently, at least this is my belief anyway, I inherently believe that that's what's going to happen. So I prepare my life now thinking that this is going to happen, and not out of fear or anything like that, knowing that like, oh, if I got to look back at this year to 2025, I want to make sure if I do look back at it, it's like, oh, I did everything, possibly beautiful that I could, I mean, of course I didn't know this when I was 25, so I'm going to have to live 25 again, and that's probably going to be but you see what I'm saying? Like, I actually think it's a really beautiful thing, and but by the way, Charles Dickens, when you look at like the, the Christmas Story, that sort of stuff, it's all based on that. And what is it? That's Trinitarian. Oh, you're going to you're visited from the ghost of the past and the present and the future. And then he looks at his life, and it wasn't just the bad things he did. It was also like, oh, this, that sort of things like, yes, I'm going to go and, make my life better. So I think that is really just something that's really ingrained in us. And that's why you see it in so many cultures. That's why you see it in so many religions. You see it in so many stories, because it's like, hey, man, there's a job to do down here. And it's called correcting the record. And that's your record,
That's it. So, beautiful. Do you think that our morals are hardwired, built in, installed more than, say, the software? Our knowledge of right and wrong?
Yeah, I think most of this stuff is inherent, I think it can easily be lifted out of you through cultural programming and all that sort of stuff, and, school systems and all that sort of, but I think inherently it is there, that's my belief anyway.
Cool. I like that. One more opposite that just came to mind when you were talking earlier about coincidency suppositorium. Did I get that right?
And, coincidentia positorum. Yep.
Okay. And the story of Cain and Abel, are they in that? Yeah. Can you say a little bit about the meaning of that?
It's another perfect example. Yeah. Or Jacob and Isaac, or Jacob and Esau, Jacob and Esau. Same sort of thing, right? That's Old Testy stuff, but you basically had, well, let's take the Jacob and Esau for the first. It's like, okay, twins, they came from the same mother, and they were warring in the womb, and then they got out, they were still warring today, kind of thing. It sets a precedent of what happens down here. There is a battle of good and evil, no matter what, So then, yeah, you were saying Cain and Abel, right? And I mean, by the way, like Cain and Abel, whether this is just coincidental or not, they are anagrams for I can and able, which is both affirmative statements of your will. I can and I am able. And what did you can? Since you can and you are able, then what did you do with that? Well, I killed the dude. I killed my brother. So then you had the willpower, and So I mean, it's really just a perfect story of the simplicity of really what we're talking about here. Good and evil. You get a choice. And there it is, that's part of the deal down here, and you will suffer for those choices,
There you go. This is a total aside, but one of my colleagues reading the Bible said that her interpretation was that Cain ate Abel because there was no body. There was just blood that went into the ground.
Oh.
And it was a cautionary tale against cannibalism. So anyway, total aside there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, here's another, let me just say this. There's a method, and I didn't know this for the longest time, right? That there's a specific methodology that you are supposed to use in order to read the Bible. Now, I actually learned this specifically. It's called the Pardes. It's called the Patristic approach, right? But basically, and I actually learned this from Kabbalists. I didn't even know that it was like a Christian thing till later. The Orthodox specifically promote this idea, and it's the fourfold patristic approach, and it's literal, moral, allegorical, and anagogical, which means when you read the Bible, there is a methodology that you are absolutely supposed to use in order to extract its meaning, right? And so it's this fourfold approach, and this leads, of course, when you get to anagogic, which is the end one, this gets to all sorts of things like astrology and astrobiology and numerology and Kabbalah, all that sort of stuff, right? But so this is a long-standing method. It was known by the Jews. It's known by the Orthodox. And as far as I know, even the Orthodox, none of them actually use it and practice it. So if you do, it's just like, hey, you got to know how to row a boat if you're going to get inside the boat and actually go downriver, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen? The boat's going to tip over. You're going to, right? No different than the Bible. You have to know how to basically unpack this thing and read it appropriately. Otherwise, you are always going to come to faulty conclusions. Now, I'm just saying that because that's something I learned over the years. Like, I'd look at something like, well, maybe it means this. And I would just start coming up with things, whatever. And then I'm like, well, no, you can't do that. That's not what the Bible's for. You have to go right to it, use the proper methodology, and then it will tell you what it's all about. And there's no other way to get to where we are as far as teaching without utilizing that. So,
And that's only in the Kabbalah.
Well, no, I learned it from Kabbalists,
Okay.
basically because it's essentially part of the Kabbalistic doctrine and how they teach the Jews specifically. I got this from Jewish Kabbalah, specifically how they teach the Bible. And it's called the Pardes, right? And this is actually an abbreviation for paradise. That's where you get the root of the word paradise, right? So I had heard about that. And then I found out that Christians did the same sort of thing. So it's not just some like Jewish thing. It's literally specifically, it's called the fourfold patristic approach. It's the same methodology, the same sort of thing. And so that's just pretty shocking to me, because it's like, how is this so well known? But as far as I can tell, literally nobody is practicing it. Nobody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So
when it comes to the astrotheology of the metaphysical, I'm assuming that's that side that or that approach to reading the Bible. How does it show up in our own personal astrology? Or does it work that way? Is there a relationship to it? I was asking in the chat in your sermon on Sunday, and Jen answered she didn't think that you'd gone down that road yet, but or maybe it's not a road to go on. That where your astrology is, although that's so complex, it's hard to say like where do you zero in your sun sign or anything like that, and how it shows up in the Bible. Does that point towards certain things that are more important to you for you in the Bible, or is that all just
not really?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm understanding you correctly, anyway, I don't think so. I don't do too much like what's my star sign or whatever, my sun sign, and then go into the Bible and look for Aquarius kind of thing. To me, the Bible, the way it's written, is literally going back to the pattern conversation, right? The Father, how his order. One of the things that those stories are trying to tell you about is that fundamental order. I mean, that's how it's written. At this point, there's just no question about it. So if the encryption is trying to tell you about the stars, it's there to teach you about the stars, which is going to lead you to obviously a robust study of astrology, so that's going to lead you into your own personal chart and all that sort of stuff. So I would say it's more for that than anything like you're going to go into the Bible and get anything personal from it. That, you know what I'm saying? If I'm understanding you correctly, anyway.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. I'm just free. So I was free associating with that one.
Mm-hmm. So.
This was something I tuned in with listening to one of your interviews, the riddle to find the middle. Is that related to what we were talking about with balance? The five? Yeah.
Yeah. That's basically it. Is once again, it's essentially this idea that these concepts are inherent, So going back to the pole star, the riddle to find the middle, that is actually, I was referencing math specifically there, but forget about the math. Let's just go to the astrology. So when we talk about that still point in the center, which is absolutely affirmed to be God's throne. I mean, just even in the biblical drawing of Earth, that's God's throne. In the middle there is where the still point and of the center and the still point is, so that would be that sort of thing that you've achieved the balance and you're off this. You're not dealing with this the ebb and flow or those pendulum swing anymore. Now you've transcended and you're off that wheel of fortune, wheel of karma, that sort of thing. All of that is what? In the middle. So and that's the pole star, you know? So that idea, the point is this, that idea has been built into our cosmos by God. You know, that's not just like a nice idea. That's like, no, the riddle of this world is to find your exit out of here, one of them, and that's exactly in the middle of this thing. So, you know, so I'm being very literal in that sort of sense, you know.
Nice. I love that. There's the classic opposition, order, and chaos. How do you see those two?
Well, same sort of thing is almost like good and evil, you know. Like I mean, this is the point. It's obviously we always want to go towards the order. We always want to go towards the good, that sort of thing. But then, of course, we always want to, you know, transcend the opposites, that sort of thing. But right now, chaos is trying to be brought to the world. And why? Why? Well, because we don't have an absolutely, you know, foundational study or understanding, I should say, of the logos, which is order. Right? If I asked 10,000 Christians what the Trinity is, I'm going to get 9,000 different answers, right? Well, why? Why is that? Well, because we actually, as Christians, don't understand the order. So then we say, okay, well, then why is chaos taking hold right now? That would be my answer, you know?
Right, exactly. I found chaos in the Bible and you found order in the Bible in the exact same place. So yeah, that's interesting, definitely. Let's see, just distilling down what to talk about. We've got another 30 minutes or so. And what about Jesus and the fish? And then I think we're right on the same subject. Your savior is in the middle of the sacred geometry was a quote. What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So here's yet another one, right? So this is the stuff that I got to that I was just like, it was insane to me that there weren't people that could just give me just explicitly just tell me what this means because it's so prevalent. What are we talking about? The Jesus fish. Okay. So you go throughout the history of Christian art, what you're going to see unquestionable is Christ centered in this, what's called a mandorla, an almond. It's basically what it is two circles that overlap each other. Okay. Well, that's also like the main theme, architectural theme that you will find on a lot of these domes, cathedrals, that sort of stuff. You walk into the entrance of a door, a lot of time it will be the upper end of a Vesca Pisces. That's what it is, right? Okay, so this is an architectural theme. It's, you know, the theme of the doors. It's on this Christian art. It's one of the main symbols of Christianity. And then I ask, what is it? Right? Like, so you're asking people that should have this knowledge and they don't have a clue. I spent years asking Christians, like, what does the Jesus fish mean? It's just a symbol kind of thing, right? Well, then you realize that Jesus fish is built off fundamental geometry and that the fundamental geometry has, once again, axiomatic or universal mathematical constants within it. Well, those things come from God. We didn't build math. We didn't create that sort of stuff. So Jesus, by him being put in the middle of a fundamental piece of geometry, if you will, sacred geometry, they're telling you something a lot of times very, very specific. And no, as far as I know, Christians don't understand it at all. So what is the Vesca Pisces? Well, I mean, it's actually considered the doorway, if you will, the doorway or the entrance back to God. It's what the Vesca, and this is why it's literally the upper half of a door when you go into a church, right? It's the same sort of thing. So this Vesca Pisces is actually, what it does is actually gives you very, very close, anyway, very, very close, the approximate of what's known as the squared circle. It's a fundamental triangle that the Great Pyramid is based off of. The Great Pyramid is 100% based off this math, right? So this is all found in this utterly simple geometric form that's at the foundation of Christianity. And what is it? It's actually the merging of opposites. It's called the squared circle. It's a circle and a square, and you bring them together and you create this third thing, which is a triangle. So all of that is provable, not even questionable at this point. You could verify everything I'm saying. Then you go to the very place that should know it, and no one has a clue. Like, what? So I came to this stuff. I'm like, that's a huge problem. This is a problem of unbelievable epic proportions. And I've been screaming for the last 3 years trying to get Christians to listen. But as you know, that's not a, you know, so, and they see that me as a threat. And I think that that's a total joke. I'm like, I'm trying to help you understand your own belief system, but you don't want to hear it because of why? Your ego, or because I'm a Gnostic, or because of Freemasonry, or because of Kabbalah, or whatever it is. That to me is just really sad, you know? It's
People
like,
only want to go so far. They come a certain distance. So I'm looking at this from a different perspective, or not a different, but on a different subject right now with the truth, truth movement, community, whatever thing that is, and how they were brave enough to start researching. Yeah, it looks like we don't need poison injections, and we're going to go against that. And then I think this is a censorable, but if I say IVM,
yep,
the drug,
yep.
and then so they're all over it, and they're promoting it, and they're selling it in my organic food group, and they're safe and effective, and I'm like, what? So just to let people know, I'm hosting Kelsey Kenny, a molecular biologist, to come and show you exactly why this is extremely poisonous. Won't be for a few weeks now, but what is that people want? They want to go a certain distance, and then it's like they're done. They feel like they arrived, and everybody else just needs to do the work. What's your explanation for that?
Oh God. I mean, I don't know, because for the longest time that bothered me, because it was just like, it's just whatever, like Trump and stuff. It's like, you haven't figured out at this point that the elections are complete frauds, like that you don't really vote for anybody. I don't know. I don't know if it's like an image thing. I don't know if it's like people are too scared to keep going. They get to a place and they're comfortable, with what they believe, and so they're just hang on to that. I mean, there's a reason that they call it the straight and narrow path, and that it's a narrow gate, because it is. Most people are not going to climb Everest. They're just not. And so I don't know what it is. Fear of rejection from your friends, for your social whatever. Right. I mean, you know about this, as most people, when you go down this road. Yeah, it's a lot of trepidation, a lot of loss of friends, sometimes loss of jobs, everything about it. And it's not fun. So it might be a thing of like, hey, you get so far and it's like, oh, well, I'm going to go so far, but I'm not going to say I'm a flat earther, or I'm not going to say whatever it is. It's like social pressure.
Yeah.
I never cared about any of it. I just was too much of a jackass, I guess. I was just like, I wanted the truth so much, and it didn't bother me if I held a belief that everybody thought was idiotic, new age bullshit. It's Christianity. Sorry, don't mean to be mean. That's okay.
Yeah, there you go. Don was giving me some props. Thank you, Don. And hello, Ryan. Nice to see you. Marty is the bomb. Yeah, super good. It's fascinating. I see it in my work because it has a great depth potential, and it's not an overnight anything. And a lot of people will go a certain amount of the way, but they don't want to keep going. They'll hit that point where it's like, no, it's enough. And might turn on me, actually, because I was around when the next level of bad stuff came up, or whatever it is. But I see there's can be limited capacity, and then the gems that just keep going, which is like amazing. Stellium 7 is here. I don't think I'll see you at an Acapulco, but maybe that would be great. And now they're together. I know, Emil. It's yeah. Oh boy, just holding my head. Yeah.
So here's a perfect understanding of a coincidentia oppositorum that you would think, that basically was presented, right? Like, oh, don't take the vax, or oh, but take this other thing. Well, it's actually neither one of them, is it? You actually want to transcend and don't take either of those things, right? This is what I mean. So, trying to stuck in this way, it's like, no, it's always the third. And this is actually what Christ represents. So yeah, it's a perfect example. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna start saying that now. Exactly. Yeah, they give you two options. I did it as a parent. You want to do this thing that I want you to do, or you want to do this thing that I want you to do, and just posing it. There's only two options here, but it definitely wasn't true. So yeah, and I gave birth to a little rebel, so he didn't go for it anyway, and made up his own mind, woke himself up, which is a miraculous event in and of itself.
How old's your son?
He just turned 18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, smart as a whip. Didn't want to, when the COVIDiocy happened, he was pretty frustrated. His dad was on an extreme other side, recommending injections and all of that. And there I was trying to go against all of it. And then my son at the time finally erupted, and he said, I don't believe my dad, and I don't believe you. And I went like, wow.
Good.
That's amazing, right? So then
start thinking of yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It wasn't. It was the gun laws that got him going down and seeing how weird everything is. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if we're starting to get down to some of the the end of the questions. Um,
Sure.
this is maybe one thing to talk about, understanding transcendentals and the lack thereof. Do you know
Hmm.
what I'm talking about there?
Um, you want to give some like specifics or like things specifically you want to talk about, or you want to just in general?
I just glommed onto that. You were talking about it. You said several times on an interview with Chance that we lack this understanding transcendentals. So I want to understand that. Yeah, you can talk about general.
Okay. Well, I mean, well, I think it's no, how do I want to start this? It's actually just understanding, like resacralizing, as you were saying, and re-understanding what is already there, right? Like most people know math. It's they don't think about it. It's just something they learn in school. They mostly hate it and stuff like that. But it's only when you come back to it with fresh eyes and a fresh mind do you actually get to see how divine it is and potent and like how absolutely amazing it is. Same sort of thing with and I'll explain why I'm talking about transcendentals here. Same sort of thing is like the cosmology, right? Like people look at the stars all the time or like been shown constellations, but it's only like when you get into it and actually start looking at it archetypally, right? That sort of thing. And you actually start extracting the philosophies from these things and the psychology and stuff like that, that you just start to get this really, really rich spiritual life. All of those things are based on what would be considered transcendentals, like meaning that numbers themselves are transcendental. They're not material. They're something that's just in everybody's head. It's just out there, if you will, and we all have access to it. That sort of thing. Same sort of thing with the stars. Those stars all transcend our experience. Correct? We don't go and touch them. We can't hang out in Orion's belt or anything like that. And yet, understanding them is what allows you to understand the divine. That's true, right? I mean, this is what, when you get once again to the core of the Bible, what is it based on? Star study. It's just all over. So that's what I mean by we don't have a relationship, if you will, to these transcendentals anymore. You can't, talk to most people and they can't tell you the first 5 digits of pi, or they can't tell you where Auriga is. They can't point out the pole star. And so, and I'm not complaining about being like, you idiots. It's like, no, that's a problem. And I just want to help and fix it and help show people, like educate people so they do have that knowledge of transcendentals. It's completely changed my life. Like I am 10,000 times smarter for being able to go into this, these topics and subjects and understanding them. I'll just tell you this from my experience, and this is what I try to share with people. The connectivity in my brain is just off the fucking charts. It's just
It really is.
there. It's just I can just feel it and sense it. And I told people this before. It wasn't always like that. I specifically have said this numerous times before, that engaging in this specific 7 classic liberal arts, right, especially with a foundation of religious study, is absolutely made my brain like a Rolodex. It just made sense of things. It's like I could understand them. Not only could I understand them, I could explain them. All of that was not brought by going to college or what, you know what I mean? It was literally the study of what would be considered the supernatural or the esoteric or the transcendentals.
That's beautiful. And I like your example of a number that it is transcendental, but that doesn't make it unreal. Like you can't give me a number. There's nothing I could hold in my hand, but that doesn't make it not real.
Most of the stuff for us that's real in this world is actually more mystical, emotional, mind stuff, right? Like you could be in no physical pain whatsoever, but you could be depressed as all shit, right? And is any of it I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't have a physical component to it, but where does it start? Here in metaphysics, spiritual,
Exactly.
yeah. So most of the stuff when we get in arguments with our friend or a wife or something like that, maybe it'll become physical or something like that, but most of the time it's not. What is it? It's emotionality. It's that sort of thing, And so most of the time we actually deal in metaphysics and we just don't even know it. Speaking, this is all metaphysical what we're doing right now. We're not
Exactly.
even in the same place. And yet the core of what we're doing is something that's incredibly mystical and we just don't think about it,
Yeah, beautiful. And what it reminds me of is the transcendental suffering, like you said. And sometimes when you're in the midst of bad circumstances, you don't suffer that much. And it can be when things get better and easier, and you can look around and you see like, oh, no evidence for suffering, and it feels like there's a knife in my heart, or the depression, or any other examples of that. And it's really beautiful because you don't have those circumstances to hang your feelings on anymore, or your inner experience on anymore. And then it's just transcendental. You can't blame anybody. You can't project it out. It's just is what it is. There comes times where you don't even have a reason. You can't like tie it back to some past or incident or event or anything like that. And to me, that's a very close place to doing the alchemy of suffering, is seeing that it's not, it is entirely transcendental, if I start using your word now, and that it has no it's not now it's not real. That's you don't want to get in that trap and say it's not real. But you want
It's
to say
almost,
more? Yeah.
yeah, it's almost more real than real. That's how I like to say it. You know what I mean? Like,
Nice.
I mean, that's probably not the best way to say it, but it is, because it's almost like a surreal aspect to it. You know, it's that sort of thing. And so, anyway, yeah. What was I going to say? One of the biggest problems I think with people that have that are on a spiritual conquest, that sort of thing, is what you had said. What did you say? People just not accepting the thing for what it is. They want life to be something else, or they want the circumstance to be something else. So they want, and the more and more you just accept the thing for what it is and try to understand it for what it is, I think the easier time is going to be. I think we spend too much time trying to force what we want in this world, as opposed to just seeing what it's doing and then responding, reacting appropriately, if you will, you know?
To what
So,
actually is. Yeah, it's one of the
mhm.
programs I teach about it's called the want for control, and it tells you you're
Yeah.
not in control. And yes, there are things we don't control, but there's a whole lot more that we do control that we forfeit in the process. And it one of its main functions is to get you to want things to be different than they are.
Mhm.
And it is as stuck as you can be. And you can take it and check it in your life. Anything that you want to change, is it changing? No, it's staying the same. You're holding it in place with that very thought of wanting to change it.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were just talking about that actually. So yeah, that's funny.
There you go.
So,
There you go. Yeah. So if we come back full circle and starting to close the interview and talk about the lamb, I just saw a comment. Hello, Michelle. Welcome. I'm not sure what you said about the lamb, but I did see the word. And this is about the Mandela effect, which I'm not sure if you subscribe to in any way, but the lamb itself is what I wanted to talk about.
oh, sure. The symbolism of the lamb. Yeah, sure. I actually have talked about Mandela effect. I actually did a whole sermon on it, but
Oh,
in
nice.
the
I can
Bible and
look
stuff
that
like
up.
that.
Do you want to
Yeah.
say quickly your take on that?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I actually explain it. This would take a half hour, so I don't know if we actually want to go down this road. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Mandela. I think it's absolutely explainable. And actually, I tried to go and explain it, and I actually cover that specific Bible verse. Like, it was changed. No, it wasn't. Just so you know. But anyway, the lamb. Let's talk about the symbolism of the lamb. Okay, so this tells you, like, first and foremost, that just that word alone, that this stuff is astrological, period. Why? Number one, lamb is a reference to Aries, which is, of course, where the sun rises in the zodiac. This is where essentially where the spring happens, right? So this would be the beginning of your zodiac. So the fact that everything is symbolically referencing a lamb, number one, just tells you that we're dealing with the zodiac and how old the zodiac is. As far as we know, thousands of years old, as far as we know, right? So that alone. Now, what is a lamb? A lamb is any sort of sheep that's 365 days or younger. That's what a lamb is. It's a lamb is the first year. So when they don't say ram and they don't say sheep, they specifically refer to a lamb. So why are they specifically referring to a lamb? Well, because they were specifically referring to the sun, because that's what he is. That's one of the symbolic manifestations of Jesus Christ, is he is the sun. So not only with this one word did they specifically give you the number 365, but they're also telling you exactly where the sun rises. So that tells you the potency of not only the language and the symbolism and things like that, but specifically what it's referenced to. And once again, can you ask a single other Christian that's going to give you that response?
No.
Yeah, that's where we are. And that's nuts. That's nuts. You know, and then it gets into the whole thing about, shows you how unbelievably brilliant these people are. Whoever passed this on or created it, or it was handed down from God, who knows? But when you look at astrobiologically, right, when you man of signs, zodiac man, anthropocosm, that figure that basically has all of the zodiac signs that are put on it, right? Old as dirt, this thing is, right? It's in the like Farmer's Almanac and stuff. Aries is assigned to the head, okay? Well, if you look from the top down of your head, inside your head, what you'll find is you'll find your fornix, and your fornix will be connected to your hippocampus. And do you know what it exactly looks like? The Aries sign, okay? The hippocampus itself, if you look at it, looks like ram's horns inside the side of your head. So now we look at this old sort of astrobiological chart of the man of the signs, that he's somehow representing everything. And then they associate all these weird animals and stuff to it. Well, if you actually do your due diligence, you'll find out that there's a specific reason that they did it, and it's freaking brilliant. It's brilliant. Like, whoever put this stuff together, they knew that at some point somebody would come back to this and actually find out what it's really all about. So what they're doing is showing these, brilliance, because it's a combination of everything: biology, astrology, the star study, that sort of stuff, psychology, all of it. It's all, symbolism. It's all combined into this one subject, and that it can all be elucidated literally through one word: lamb. So then you look at the Bible and you're like, that's genius. It's genius. Like, I can't even get over how complex you can create something with such simplicity.
Indeed. And precision.
Yeah.
As you're talking, right? That lamb not being the ram, the 365-day old at most. And that's very alchemist, by the way. That precision is very alchemist in my alchemist world. The way
it's one of the things actually we talked about last Sunday is word association. It's one of the things that actually shows that your brain is working properly, because you take a thing and say, okay, what are all the things I can associate with this? Okay, white purity, beginning of the year, 365 days. Oh, that's reference to the sun. You can even look at the amount of time that a lamb is pregnant, and that points directly to your hands. Like, this is stuff that we cover, So it's like, it's just genius, and the syncretism of the whole thing, the syncretic, how completely connected everything is just beyond brilliant, So
right would have to be a revelation, not thought of. Do you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
You don't. Yeah. This gets right back to the conversation about when an artist receives or creates something, what's actually happening. It's a reception. That's what it is. That's what it feels like. So whoever got it, just like anything that I do, I always feel like it's received. I never be like, yeah, I came up with that. It's just not, it doesn't make any sense to me. So it would only make sense to me, especially because Kabbalah literally means reception or to receive, that's what's going on with these ancient scripts. They were completely connected to God. Just,
There you go. One last question, if you don't mind, just about how much code is there. And sometimes they talk about, say, like the 12 days of Christmas. I had a 92-year-old woman. Unfortunately, they got her with the jab and she died. But she said how the 12 days of Christmas was encoded. So because they were otherwise persecuted if they were to teach about God and Jesus and through the Bible and everything. So they created this 12 days of Christmas song to symbolize, and she gave me the meaning of each of the 12 days of Christmas. That's really about the more esoteric meaning of Christianity and Christ's life and all of that kind of thing. So do you think that coding would come about for protection of it? Alchemy is the same way. It's not like you can go and the books aren't going to show up on the chapters, or maybe they do. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is it to protect and hide, or?
Well, this is what Freemasonry is all about. And this is actually it's an extension of Jesus's teachings. Like Jesus, you can kick, scream, not like it, whatever, but Jesus had a secret society. That's what his disciples were. He taught them things that he did not teach other people. He told them things in a specific way in which he knew that only they would understand and no one else would. There's numerous times in the Bible, we've highlighted them, where Jesus comes along and says, don't tell anybody. I literally just showed you a miracle. Don't say anything, right? So what Masonry is, and what a lot of these actual secret orders are all about, is absolutely being custodians of this ancient knowledge to protect it. Okay, this is why there's secrecy in Masonry. Newsflash: Masonry doesn't actually have a bunch of secrets. They don't. They don't. You can find out every password, everything that you want about Masonry. Why do they keep secrets? To, number one, keep their structure going, basically, to once again be custodians of the knowledge and to entice you, because especially as a young inquisitive man, there's nothing more that entices you than a mystery. What's going on in there? What are you doing? Why? That's exactly what happened to me. So when we talk about things being encoded, encrypted, that sort of stuff, absolutely one of the reasons is for preservation. Okay. The other reason you encrypt something, especially when you talk about metaphysical, right? Like obviously you got people in the world that want to destroy everything. If you encrypt something into something that's metaphysical, like language, how do you destroy that? You don't, unless you kill all the people that speak that language. Eventually, if it's encrypted in there, it will be found, which means that whoever decided to do that knew that that would be preserved that way. You could burn all the Bibles, and guess what would still be there? The language. So once again, when you actually understand the reasons for why these people have done this and the organization, stuff like that, it's brilliant. It's so noble, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, very far reaching and legacy leavers
Yeah.
that did that. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Marty Leeds, what a fabulous conversation. I've totally enjoyed myself. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Do you want to share with people all of your goodness? If Jen is still around, could she share links to all of the ways that people can contribute
Oh,
to your work?
she's making me dinner now. So
She's making you dinner. She's on another project. Well, all roads lead to your website, right?
yeah,
Gnostic.
gnosticacademy.org. It's actually being rebuilt right now. Hopefully it'll be up in the next day or so. And
Oh
yeah.
yes, it was down today. I tried to pull it up.
Yes, it's being rebuilt. So, yep, they're getting top to bottom. We're redoing the whole thing, so we had to. So, but yeah, it's got all the donation links there and stuff like that. We have like Venmo and Buy Me a Coffee and all that sort of stuff if you want to put. But the best thing to do is Telegram channel, because it's a great group of people in there, and service every Sunday. And then I usually post a video usually once, between the week, something like that. But service every Sunday, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. So
yeah, it's a wonderful service. Thank you so much for doing that.
yeah,
And you attract really great people. To me, that's always a sign about the person that is attracting. That if you've got good people around you, it's a good sign about you too.
That was one of the main things about doing this. It was like we really wanted to filter out anybody that wasn't going to be super, super cool. Like we literally are creating, in one sense, like a little echo chamber, but the echo chamber is just cool ass people being like, supporting one another and not, anyway, just no drama, none of that stuff. So
That's brilliant. I love that. And so I will play us out with another clip from my son. He is in the show notes, and he's all about the guns, guitars, and knives. So if you like that, please do sub to his channel. And I want to shout out quickly about some streams coming up. If you are, if your time is short, feel free to go, Marty. But coming up after Anarchapulco, this week, Wednesday, I'm going to do a stream on the tariff wars that are fake and gay. I'm going to have Brendan Sterling on to talk about why they're not anything to worry about. It was pretty interesting, actually. Our dollar plummeted last week and went to a low it hadn't been at for a long time, and everybody's like this. And then I looked at the chart yesterday, and it was like, yeah, it went down one day, came up the next day, went down again one day, and then went right back up to normal, whatever normal is.
mm-hmm.
So we're going to put some people's minds at ease with that. And then we have Moshe Daniel Block coming up when I'm back, and Tony Rizik talking about Base Camp for Men, Kelsey Kenny on the IVM issue, and then Crow is going to come on as well to talk about building community on the 3rd and the 17th. So you can find out all about that at bethmartins.com. If you sign up for a 10-minute archetype quiz at a link I'll share with you, then you get notifications about all my live streams that you can visit. You can also catch these after the fact on Spotify and Apple, iTunes, and several podcast channels. If you prefer to be listening, you can always catch them. And Yeah, so getting lots of good props in the chat. Thank you so much, Marty. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate reaching out, and it's nice meeting you.
Yeah, I look forward to maybe even seeing you in Missouri.
We should. Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I'll play us out. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Bye.